What's up guys, and welcome back. Today I'll be making a track like John Hopkins, and this is a little snippet of what I'll be making. As always guys, if you want the project file and the stems of this track, it's available to download over at my community. There's also monthly sample and preset packs. I've just dropped the one for April, courses and feedback, and so much more. There's currently a discount for the earliest members, so if it sounds interesting, there's a link in the description. But let's get straight into the production guys. So for this track, I want to do something similar to neon pattern drum. I love that really weird and granular housey type of style that John Hopkins has in this track. So I'm going to set the BPM to 115 and get a kick down. We're going to drag in this kick from my latest sample pack and loop this over. It's got kind of an acoustic element to it, which is also perfect for this textured style that John Hopkins has. Made it a bit louder, and let's just loop it for 16 bars. We got this clap in, which is playing on the 2 and 4. Really short and snappy clap, and I'm going to put some effects on it. And on that I just put a frequency shifter, which makes it sound like this. Then I added this Foley snare, which is a layer to the clap. And it's playing off the grid, as you can see here, it's playing before the beat. So this is what it sounds like alone. And with the clap. And with the kick. We got this hat. And I've looped that and put a frequency shifter on it to make it sound like this. And with everything, it sounds like this. I've quickly just put a master chain on it to prevent clipping. All we got is a distortion. It's not got any drive on it, but it's got the DC filter on, so it cuts out everything that's below 20 Hz. Then we got this G clip, which is soft clipping the master. And then we're pushing it quite a lot with the limiter. Then I've added this percussion sound, which also plays some off-grid rhythms, which sounds like this. That's got phase distortion and frequency shifting as well. So without those, and with the kicks, and with everything. It's kind of like a cool Foley touch. Then I've chopped up another Foley loop to sound like this. And with the drums. And I'm looping that throughout the entire loop. We got another Foley sample. And now the final Foley sound. But it's not truly John Hopkins unless there's some kind of granular effects going on. So we're going to group this and put some effects on the bus. First, a frequency shifter on the entire bus, without it, and with it. Then we got this RC20 for some texture. And finally, this is where we're adding the granular effects. So I'm using this thing that's called an effects layer inside of Bitwig Studio. It's basically an effects where you can split the sound into 2 or more layers and then process those layers individually. It's a way to have both the dry signal of the loop, but also have some effects going on in the background as another layer. So as you can see, the first layer has nothing on it because it's just a dry signal, and that's at 0 dB. But the second layer is where we have the effects. So let's start with the ring modulation, and I've soloed just this layer. It looks like this, where I've turned the frequency all the way up to give it a really ringy sound. It's almost like a bit crush, but this is way crunchier. And then we got a portal. I'm using the preset grain swells. It's pretty much just like one of the first presets here. And yeah, that makes it sound like this. You can really hear that like weird granular sound going on. And then we got a duck. And then we got a sidechain, so this granular layer doesn't interfere with the rhythm of the dry signal. So this granular layer sounds like this. And together with the dry signal, it sounds like this. You can hear that it's pretty subtle, and it's just acting like an ear candy in the background. I think now it's time for some synths. I've dragged in this Atmos loop from this month's sample pack in my community, and it sounds like this. It's a pretty cool loop in my opinion, and I think it's going to fit really well in the background in this track because of the granular sound. So for our main lead synth, I'm starting with this sound that I've made in a stock synth called Polysynth in Bitwig Studio, and it sounds like this. You can already hear that kind of dirty John Hopkins sound to it, which we're going to process further. So all the movement that you're seeing here might confuse you, but it's actually pretty simple. All it is a basic saw wave with one voice of unison. As you can see, it's all the way to the 1, which meaning we're only using the first oscillator. That's got some noise. I've turned up the pre-filter drive on this, which is saturation, like 3.4 dB. And then all this movement is basically an LFO modulating the parameters. It's the exact same as if you're using Serum or Vital and using the LFO to modulate parameters. The LFO is down here on 2.88 Hertz. And we're just mapping that to these parameters, making it go up and down. So that's mapped to the noise, the filter oscillator FM, and the filter cutoff. And that makes it sound like this. I'm going to make a progression with the synth, and then we're going to process it to make it really John Hopkins-y. So I've now spent some time making this progression, which sounds like this. This housey John Hopkins kind of sound has more of a dark and mysterious tone to it usually, so I tried to emulate that in my chord progression. We start with a kilohertz distortion, which makes it sound like this. Then I added this distortion preset from Bitwig, and I mapped this random modulator to the mix, so the mix is going up and down in this distortion. And it may sound a bit too dirty and over the top, but we're going to fix this. Then I add another portal with the preset exponential space, which makes it sound like this. Really weird and spacey now. And this is where the magic's at. I'm using this LFO here with this rhythm to create the wub effect in the synth. Next, we add a Valhalla vintage verb, an EQ to cut out the lows, and lastly an SSQ to boost the highs. I forgot this Atmos. I need to pitch it to fit the track, which is pitching it up 7 semitones. I'm also putting a similar duck on the atmosphere, but just at 45%. And these things so far sound like this. Then I've added this bass layer, which sounds like this. Really dirty and really growly. It just follows the same progression as the bass notes in the chord progression, so that's pretty simple. But let's turn off the effects and show you the synth. So this is what it sounds like. It's just an FM4. It's just a simple FM bass. We got a decapitator on that, distorting it a little bit. We got another one of these effects layers to split the signal into 2. The first layer has nothing on it and it's the dry signal. The second layer has a phase distortion, a bit crushing, an isotope trash, and a low cut EQ. So this layer is acting like a top bass pretty much. So with this effects layer, it sounds like this. Then we got the duck on that, which is the same LFO as the synth, but at 65% mix. Then I got a solid bus comp with the mix bus parallel preset, looking like this. And then lastly, an EQ. Let's group all these together and just add a sidechain quickly as well. I'm turning down the mix of the LFO on the Polysynth to around 90%, just so a bit more of the synth comes through. Next, I've added a Vital preset on here. This is just the same chord progression as the main synth, just copied over. I've used a preset called Melodic Bubbles in my sound bank for Vital, and with some reverb as well, that sounds like this. Together, it sounds like this. And I forgot to mention as well, on this Vital sound there's a low cut EQ and a high cut EQ. One last thing I'm going to do is group the kick and the other drums and put some knock on there, adding some transient, some high end, and some hard clipping. That makes the drums go from this to this, just cutting through the mix a bit more. I'm actually going to turn down the modulation of the dusty distortion here, just to make it a bit less crunchy. I think it sounds good, but this synth is a bit too weird. I'm going to turn down this distortion a bit, and then turn down the mix of the Portal as well. I think that sounds better. I'm going to copy this over and we're going to make a little intro. Copying over the atmosphere here and just turning it down in volume a bit. Going to mute the sidechain, of course, in the intro. I'm going to copy the bass and move that over as well, and then just turn off the LFO and make it a bit quieter. And I'm going to do the same with the synth actually, and just turn off some of the effects. Let's delete that kilohertz distortion and the LFO as well, and turn it down a lot. And that's it for this little John Hopkins idea, guys. It's definitely one of the stranger tracks I've made on this channel, but I still think it sounds really unique and groovy. Like I already mentioned, the project and stems are available in my community. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys, and I'll play the track through.